This time on Rad Rat Video, we're talking about if capitalism is controlling skateboarding and also what the best line ever filmed is. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Rad Rat Video, a channel where you can learn new things about skateboarding. I talk about all kinds of different skateboarding topics. I teach tricks. I show you the physics of different things in skateboarding. I review skateboarding video games. I answer your questions here on Ask Rad Rat. Today, I got 3 questions for you. Let's get into the first one. This is from IA, who says, what do you think is the influence of our economic system, capitalism, on skateboarding? For instance, would people do more and more crazier stuff in skateboarding if there was no pressure on them getting recognized? So that's kind of interesting because you took the opposite angle at it than I would. So let's imagine if there's no economic benefit to skateboarding at all. It's not like you're going to get sponsors and get rich because of being good at skateboarding. So you're saying that with less pressure, you would go bigger. In my mind, I think that would kind of hold you back. Maybe not you, but skateboarding in general. Like, there's got to be people out there who are jumping off of a building just thinking like, this is the thing that's finally going to get me that deal, right? This is finally going to get me my shoe if I can get this ender or something along those lines. If knowing that it's your job and the only way for you to be economically stable is to be the best in the world, I think that puts more pressure on doing crazy tricks than not having that would be, right? I mean, you can debate that in the comments. I'm not entirely sure about that, but one thing I do think would happen is that it would be more, skateboarding would just be art for art's sake. No one would think, I'm going to be famous, I'm going to be changing the world with this, I'm just going to do what I want to do, and I'm going to go out and have fun, because why not? And so you'd have a lot more completely original, unique stuff. One thing I'll talk about when we get to the lines thing is how back in the day, a little bit now, but it was a lot worse before, there was only certain tricks that were okay. You couldn't really do a 540 flip and be taken seriously. It was like a joke trick. It was like a stupid circus move. Like, what do you think you're doing? Like, that's whatever. But if there was no economic pressure, if there was no, this is what companies expect to see sort of viewpoint, then I feel like doing anything you want would be more acceptable. Like, nowadays on Instagram, you could follow a certain hashtag where people only skate like it's 1983 and they do only board slides on curbs while they're cruising around. Like, that's fine. You can find that now. But I think that would be a bigger thing where it's more open for everybody having their own interpretation of skateboarding. But I also think that things would progress a little bit slower for the reasons I talked about before. If you're not trying to get on the cover of, well, I guess you could still have coverage, but if it's not going to mean a bigger paycheck for you to do this instead of that, for you to do this extra big stair set instead of that one, I think it would slow people down slightly. So that's my thought on that. Let me know what you think about that below. Be interested to see that. Next question is from Caden, who says, can you use a street deck and street wheels for freestyle skateboarding? Yeah, you obviously can. Look at Rodney Mullen. He uses a regular street board, street wheels, street trucks, everything, and he is still probably the best in the world. There's other people who do specifically only freestyle all the time, and they're getting really, really good, but still, compared to Rodney Mullen, you know, he's still the greatest. So there are a lot of benefits to freestyle boards. For example, the wheels are offset. That means that the center of the wheel, like where the bearings are, is off to the side so that there's more wheel to cover up the nut for the axle. And that's a really good thing because if you're landing on the rail a lot, you're not going to scratch up that nut and make it so it won't turn anymore. Plus, you're not landing on a nut, you're landing on the whole wheel, so it's a lot more stable. That helps a lot, but you don't need them. You can do perfectly fine without it. Having trucks that are smaller than the board, like one step smaller, is nice because the board will be more stable. You're not like rocking back and forth on the rail. Some people like a single kicktail. They think it's easier for Caspers and for finger flips and some other stuff like that, but you don't need it. If you get really, really into freestyle, you love it, you do it nonstop all the time, then definitely consider trying one out, but you don't need it at all. I'm actually trying to do the opposite. I'm trying to get one board that works for everything. I love doing freestyle and I love doing normal street. I'm probably about 50-50 between the two. And I have yet to come up with a solution that I really think is great for both. There's big compromises one way or the other. So I'm not really sure how to do it. I had a board made, actually I have it right here. I made this board through open source skateboards. I made a review video about the process. You can watch that right here. But what I did was I blunted the tails, which is good for Casper, so it's not like you're on a rounded edge, you're more stable. And I made it less steep, the concave, which is good for certain things. So I tried to experiment with that, and this I went a little bit too far as like what I thought would work. But I do think it is possible to have a board that's pretty much perfect for everything. I just haven't skated it yet. But no, you don't need it. You can do most tricks on a penny board if you want. Like, just skate whatever you have access to and whatever you like. Okay, last question. I'm sorry I didn't copy down your name. I think this one was from Twitter, maybe. He says, hey, I once read that PJ Ladd's final line in Wonderful Horrible Life was the hardest line ever committed to film. Do you think that still holds? If not, what is the hardest line ever? Now that you mention it, I would probably have to agree with that line. The thing is, something filmed yesterday and put on Instagram could be better potentially, but you got to look at things in context of when they were filmed. That video came out, I think, in 2003. Let's just take a second and let's watch it. And I think it's important to watch it just as it goes, to watch the flow of it, because it's so perfect. There's an exact amount of space between the tricks. He knows how much room he'll need to do the next thing. He's able to hit the ledge and then the sewer grate, but he's got time for one more trick in the middle of it. It's just really, really solid. It ends on that push where it cuts to black. That line is etched in a lot of our minds who saw that video back when it was new, because it was just the craziest thing that a lot of people had seen. And if you started skateboarding more recently, you may have seen all those tricks a million times. It might not seem like that big of a deal. You might know somebody who can do most of those tricks. You might even be able to do them in a line. It's possible. There's probably at least a few people who could do that line these days, no problem. But this was 2003. Things were really different at the time. As I mentioned before, certain tricks were okay, certain ones were not. I don't think I had ever seen a fakie gazelle flip before, because it's too weird, right? Board does a 540, you do a 360. Like, that's a ridiculous trick. That's a stupid circus trick. No one should ever take that trick seriously. If you can't do it down 10 stairs, then it's not a real trick. There was a lot of that type of thought process back then. And so he hops up this curb and he does a fakie gazelle flip. Most people had never seen that before. No one knew what to call it, I remember, either, because the name gazelle comes from freestyle, where you do 540 show it, 360 body barrel off the nose. It was a really common trick in freestyle, but it never really made the way to the street yet. So people were trying to come up with like, okay, big spin is 360 board with a 180 body follow. Then there's bigger spin, which would be like 540 board, 180 body, and biggest spin. Is that what this is? Just trying to come up, like, no one even knew what this thing was. So nowadays you may see gazelle flips all the time. I saw one just on Instagram a couple days ago. Guy did one going forward. It was only fakie for a good long while because it's so hard. Saw a guy do one going forward off of a couple stairs, landed it perfectly, looked amazing. But at the time, this was like, what was that? What are you even doing? He just threw the board and landed on it like it was nothing. Like, it was ridiculous. And then he follows that up right away like it was nothing with a half cab nose slide, not only 270 heel flip out. And that trick, not only does he do it flawlessly, but that was still like a standalone trick at the time. It's still hard now. You might see it a little more often. You may see something a little bit more complicated these days. But that was basically a standalone trick. He did that in a line with a circus move that no one's ever heard of before, back to back like it's nothing. And that blew at everyone's minds. Then he follows up with a switchback heel. Not the craziest trick in the world, but he still does it really, really cleanly. Looks awesome. And it's not easy for me. I've never done one. I can do any 180 flip trick except for that one. That one is so hard. But he just does it like it's nothing, no big deal. And then perfect tray over that sewer grate. And even now, that's an amazing line. I don't know if anyone could do it quite as well as him, but it is possible that someone could do that these days, of course. But for the time especially, just mind-blowing. So I was trying to think of what lines were better than that. And you said the hardest lines, but I don't know, like, is technical difficulty the only thing that matters, or is it like how mind-blowing it was at the time? So I came up with a couple, and I spent a lot of time on this. I watched a bunch of old video parts back to try to find some that I was thinking of, but it was kind of tough. I know there's probably a lot that I'm missing, so put those in the comments for sure. But I just spent a lot of time looking at these, mostly old because I'm old and that's what I remember. But the first one I thought of was, of course, Rodney Mullen and Questionable, because that's the best video part ever. And he starts it with a nollie backside 360 shove it, late front foot flip. And that trick is just absolute nonsense. I've seen people do a lot of shove it late flips. I can do one myself. I can do the normal backside shove it late front foot flip. And that trick it works because you're popping with one foot and you're flipping with the other. Any kind of shove it late flip is usually done like that. If it's front side, if it's big spin or whatever, it doesn't matter. They usually scoop with one foot, flip late with the other one. He somehow does them both with the same foot. He pops forward and then flicks it down. Like, perfect timing. That trick blows my mind. I've never seen anyone else do it like that. I've seen back-footed and I've seen big spin, but I haven't seen that trick done ever again. That trick alone would be a standalone move. I don't know, whatever. It's just one of those crazy Rodney Mullen tricks that no one's ever repeated, and it just exists like it's no big deal. But he does it in a line, and it is kind of a weird line. I feel like this line was kind of just improv afterward, but it's still really good. After that, he goes for the nollie flip. Still relatively a new trick, not that big of a deal anymore, obviously. But then he does a 360 flip. Again, not that big of a deal, but goes for a nollie frontside 540 shove it to manual. Then he shove it to nose manual, 360 shove it out. For him, maybe not a big deal. I think I've seen him do that exact combo before. And yes, you can't really do a stationary manual trick in a line or at all in a video part anymore. It's kind of funny that that was okay. Like, he's just riding around a basketball court doing manuals on flat and it's in a video, but you can't deny how ridiculously hard that is. Come on, like, not a lot of people could have ever done that combo. That's just so hard. And then he follows up with a double kickflip. Again, just kind of looks like it's an off-the-cuff thing. But he was just that good that I really feel like that was either unplanned or just like, I don't know. It's just mind-blowing that he came up with this ridiculous trick and he's like, let's just keep it going. And that's the stuff that he did. So, I don't know. That line is always really impressive to me. He has a couple other ones in that video as well that are just so incredibly difficult. It's hard to imagine. But let's look at the next one I came up with. This is Jamie Thomas in Welcome to Hell. And this one probably doesn't stand up as well. Of course, Rodney Mullen doing flat ground manuals doesn't hold up well either. But it's a couple of handrails with a few flat ground tricks in the middle. But these rails were still considered really, really big at the time. This was some heavy tricks for 95. And he did two of them back to back. And you really can't deny that this had a lot of effect on people. This blew some minds back when it happened. And this would have been considered probably the hardest line ever done around that time. Next one I thought of was Mike Carroll in Modus Operandi. And in this one, none of the individual tricks seem like they're that crazy, but it's just how fluidly they're put together. The trick selection is just perfect. The way everything flows, the way it all goes, like it just feels like such a good line. And there are a lot of people who say that he brought back hard flips with this one, because that's how he ends it. Because hard flips in the mid-90s are totally vertical end over end. That went out of style. And then hard flips just entirely were gone. And he just kind of threw that. And I think I remember him just deciding to do that. Like, that wasn't even part of the line originally. And he just kind of threw it or something. But people say that brought back hard flips. That reminded people that hard flips were a thing and showed them that they could still be cool. That's a pretty big deal. And that line is always one of the highlights. Last one I could think of for just pure difficulty was this one by P-Rod in the primitive video. It's a nollie heel tail slide, then switch backside flip over to crook. That switch backside flip over to crook, that's crazy. Like, I've seen it before, sure, but this is in a line. It's switch, which for P-Rod, I mean, whatever. Switch and normal are basically the same thing. But how well it's done, how cleanly it's done, how smooth it is. He's got a lot of really good lines. There were a couple that I could have picked from him, but that one stood out to me as being pretty remarkable. So those were my hardest lines that I could find. I know there are some other ones. There was one I was thinking of, and I'm not sure if this was a line or not, and I also couldn't find it. But there was a line where the guy does front blunt big spin flip out to fakie at the end. And now I'm not sure. I think maybe it was a line that did a blunt slide kick flip out, and then it cut to a blunt slide big spin flip out as a standalone trick afterward. Not entirely sure. I'm not sure what I was thinking of. I watched so many videos trying to figure that out. But I had fun doing it, so whatever. But if you can think of that, put that in the comments. Otherwise, your recommendations or your suggestions for which line was actually the best, put that down below. There's so many to count from. Also, there is an Instagram profile I like called No Push Lines, where he posts all kinds of lines without pushing in them. So a couple tricks back to back, keeping the speed the whole way. I love that. I love watching lines, and there's so many really, really good ones. So that's the ones I came up with. Let me know yours below. Also, go to radratvideo.com and submit your questions for the next round of questions. I had a few lined up, but I am running a little bit low, so go ahead and ask me whatever you want on there to be covered in a future video. But until then, make sure you subscribe by tapping that button in the middle of the screen, and here's some more videos you can check out in the meantime as well. Thank you for watching.